So I take it that means that since you don't want to give your money to EA directly, that you're going to stop getting Madden every year?
Oh, no. Let's not be ridiculous.
Oh, I knew that was the answer. I just wanted to call you out for your hypocrisy.
Welcome, nerds, to another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a weekly nerd culture podcast that discusses the culture through various segments. My name is Patrick Kuhn, alongside my co-host, as always, that Tyler Hunt. How's it going, man?
Doing okay, man. How are you?
I'm good. So I wanted to get your opinion on something. It's been kind of bugging me for the last week or so. So we kind of talked a little bit last week off the air about how I was kind of getting stressed out about how much video games are out right now, and finding time to play them and play them as much as I wanted to play them. And so we have Battlefront 2 coming out a little less than a week since we're recording this on Saturday night. Honestly, with everything that's coming out about the game and some of the microtransactions, I think I might cancel my pre-order.
In your scenario, I think that's probably a good call. I haven't really paid attention to anything. Is it pretty mediocre reviews, kind of like the first Battlefront?
Well, it's not necessarily the reviews that are my biggest issue. It's basically just EA's really kind of a scummy company, and I've known that for a while because I get Madden every year. I don't play Madden Ultimate Team a ton. Like this year is the most I've ever played it. And the microtransactions on that game is ridiculous. And that's kind of how EA operates. I understand that it's a business, and their philosophy is why make 10 to 15 games a year when they can make 7 or 8 with microtransactions and make the same amount of money. Like, I get that. It's a business. But to be so open and just gross about it, like, they don't give a shit about anything but the microtransactions, it seems like. And especially in Battlefront 2, there's been a lot of stories of how the loot crate system kind of operates and how much it's going to cost. And basically, it sounds like you're going to pay $60 for this game, and then you're going to have to at least put another $60 into the microtransactions to even compete on multiplayer. So I think what I'm going to do is cancel my pre-order. Still going to play the game. I'm just going to rent it from GameFly because I already have a subscription to GameFly because that's how much I play. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I know I'm still kind of giving my money to EA because I'm sure GameFly has to pay for the games just like we do, but I'm not directly giving them my money because it just seems weird. Like, they're just so scummy.
Yeah, I don't know that I would recommend not picking the game up on principle or anything like that. I just think that in your case where you're juggling 3 or 4 games and another one's getting ready to come out, that is probably not going to be the life-changing game we want it to be, and you could probably either skip it or do what you said and just rent it from GameFly. So I think that's probably a good call. I will probably still pick it up. But I hope that I get a lot more playing time out of it than I got out of the first Battlefront, because that game was super fucking disappointing.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'm still going to play it for sure. I'm pretty excited about the campaign, the fact that you get to play as part of the Empire. That's something that we haven't really seen much. So I think it's going to definitely be interesting. So I'm excited for it. Like I just said, I don't think that I want to give my money to EA directly. I'll probably just end up renting it from GameFly.
So I take it that means that since you don't want to give your money to EA directly, that you're going to stop getting Madden every year?
Oh, no. Let's not be ridiculous.
Oh, I knew that was the answer. I just wanted to call you out for your hypocrisy.
Oh, yeah, and I understand that, but, I mean, I love Madden so much that it's...
And you don't love Star Wars so much?
I do love Star Wars, but I know that Madden's going to be a good game every year because I buy it every year and I enjoy it every year. Battlefront still has yet to prove to me that they are going to make a good game. Because I'm excited about the campaign, and I'm excited about the prospects of playing as the Empire. But like you said, the first Battlefront was garbage. Now, they've made good games in the past, but as the new generation of consoles, they have yet to make a good game. So I want them to prove it to me. Madden has already proven it to me.
Okay, that's fair. I just, I understand where you're coming from. So hopefully it comes out next week and it blows everybody away, but I doubt that it's going to do that, and probably will envy you for being able to rent it as opposed to pay your $60 for it up front.
For sure. So let's just go ahead and jump right into what we're into. It's just kind of the first segment that we start every episode on. We just kind of like checking in with each other. We call it what we're into, like I said. So what are you into this week?
So this weekend, I watched 2 murder mystery movies, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to talk about the good one that I saw. And I think we'll talk about the other one a little later. So the movie that I'm talking about is Wind River, which is a film that premiered at, I believe, Sundance earlier this year. It stars Elizabeth Olsen and Jeremy Renner. It's directed by Taylor Sheridan, who was the writer of Hell or High Water, and he also wrote Sicario. But this is the first film that he's directed that I've seen. But in all fairness, he's only directed one other movie. It was a 2011 movie called Vile. So I don't know that got a very wide release or anything. So this is kind of, his breakout directing performance in my opinion, since, it's a pretty good cast and it was at Sundance, all that good stuff. So to kind of quote IMDb here and explain what this movie's about, it's a chilling thriller, and it follows rookie FBI agent who's played by Elizabeth Olsen. And then she teams up with Jeremy Renner, who's a local game tracker and deep community ties to the area that this takes place in, and they're investigating the murder of a local girl on a Native American reservation because her death is quite mysterious. So that's kind of the synopsis that IMDb gives, and I gotta say, man, like I said it at the beginning of my little spiel here, but it was really, really good. I thought the suspense in this movie was awesome, especially within the third act. I think that Jeremy Renner and Elizabeth Olsen have great chemistry on screen, and it was nice to see that there wasn't a romantic story between their characters. For me, the movie was just about solving the case of this Native American woman that died. So it was nice to see the movie focus on that mystery and focus on the terrible things that come out of a situation like this, instead of forcing a romantic angle between 2 characters, which I thought was pretty awesome. This movie definitely resonates as well, kind of given this current climate of the entertainment industry. The Native American woman, it focuses on the physical and sexual abuse of her, and not only her, but apparently it's kind of an epidemic on Native American reservations, which I was not aware of. So it was something I've never heard of, and this movie does a great job of putting the spotlight on that unfortunate thing that's going on that doesn't really get a whole lot of play in the news. So this issue is rampant, and this movie definitely highlights it. With that being said, it's a great movie, and I think it has a great message, but my opinion, I understand, may be skewed because I watched this right after I watched a bad mystery movie, which we'll talk about later. But I was really, really surprised by how much I like this, and I think that I've become like a pretty big Taylor Sheridan fan after seeing this. Like, he knocked it out of the park with writing Hell or High Water. I've heard Sicario is amazing, and then this film he wrote and directed was really great as well. So I think that it comes out on Blu-ray this Tuesday, so the day after this podcast is released, and then you'll also be able to rent it on demand. So I highly recommend it. It is a great murder mystery movie with a pretty important message as well.
Yeah, I saw this movie a few weeks back, and I agree with you. I think it's definitely one of those movies that resonates with you for a little bit. I thought the cast did a really great job. I haven't seen him be this good in a while, so I really appreciated that. I really love wintertime, and I love movies that are kind of set in like Alaska and that type of environment. I think those are always set really, really cool. I just love that atmosphere. So I really appreciate that aspect of the movie. And like you said, it tells a story that doesn't get reported on very often or at all. So I thought it was definitely an important message. And I really liked how it wasn't over the top. Like, I think a lot of these movies have the tendency, because there's so many murder mystery movies out there, that there has to be some weird twist to it. And there really wasn't that big of a twist. It was, I don't want to say it was simple, but it was pretty straightforward. Like, it wasn't ridiculous. And so I definitely appreciate that. It really it didn't rely on that crazy twist. It was more about the performances and the character development and the writing. And so I really appreciated that. So yeah, it's definitely one of those movies that I would strongly recommend, because I really enjoyed it as well.
I think that this will be in my top 10 at the end of the year.
Really? I think going into it, it was one of those movies where I'd heard some really good things that I kind of wanted it to be, and maybe my expectations were a little too high. It's a very, very good movie, but I doubt it's going to squeak into my top 10.
Yeah, like I said, my opinion is probably a little skewed because of the movie I watched previous to this. And then also I had absolutely, no expectations going into it because I hadn't heard anything. So maybe that's the difference between our viewing experiences.
For sure.
Cool, man. What are you into?
I am into Call of Duty World War II. I've been playing the shit out of this game. It was released last Friday. I want to say that for a while there, it was set to release on the same day as Battlefront 2. Maybe I'm wrong, and I feel like it got pushed up because of Battlefront 2, but I don't know if that's true or not, but it just seemed like for a while there, they were both supposed to be released on November 17th. And I think I actually may have tweeted this out or put it on Facebook. I don't remember. I tweet out a lot of stuff during the week, so sometimes I forget. But when I played Breath of the Wild earlier this year in March when it was first released, I assumed, okay, that's going to be it. That's my game of the year. Like, I love Zelda. That game is amazing. It's open world Zelda. Like, it's fantastic. And I didn't expect anything to even come close to it. I really enjoyed Little Nightmares. That was a fun little game, but it was pretty short. So I honestly am not a huge Call of Duty fan. I do enjoy the historical Call of Duties, but I don't really like the Modern Warfare, Infinity Warfare, and all that good stuff. So I was really surprised at how much I liked this game, because honestly, I wouldn't put it up there with Breath of the Wild, but it definitely is giving that game a run for its money as far as my game of the year is concerned. So I started with the campaign last Saturday after we recorded last week's episode, and I had it beat by Tuesday. So it's a relatively short campaign, and I think most games are kind of going to more the multiplayer anyways, so it didn't necessarily surprise me that it was a little short. That being said, the story is really, really great. There's some really good character development in it, especially for a video game. There's some twists and turns at the end that you absolutely have to care about these characters for it to even hit at all. And because of the character development, you do really care for these characters, and you can really appreciate those twists and turns. I thought that they did a really good job at mixing up some of the action. I mean, of course, you have just those crazy war scenes where you're just plowing through like a bunch of just waves and waves of German soldiers. But there's also some tank battles that you have to do. There's some fighter jet stuff in there as well. So I thought that they did a really good job of kind of mixing up the gameplay a little bit. My only real nitpick with the campaign is the fact that even though they did a good job mixing it up, I didn't think that there was enough. Like, I wanted more of the tanks and I wanted more of the fighter jets, and you only kind of get a little bit of both, but there's not quite enough. So that was kind of my only nitpick with the campaign. The graphics are breathtaking. They have been really, really good for a long time, but I definitely think that they kind of took it to a new level with this new game. There's just ridiculous amount of detail. Apparently, I found out this the other day that there's a ship that's even makes an appearance in the game that apparently was from Evansville, which is where Tyler's from and where I'm currently living. So that was kind of cool. Somebody noticed that in the game.
What, and the LST?
Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha.
It's actually, you can actually see it in a cutscene in the game. So they definitely put a ton of detail into this game, which I thought is not really surprising because Call of Duty is kind of known for that, but it's still really cool to see it. I will say that the facial animation isn't quite Mass Effect bad, but there's some stuff like, and I've said this with like when we reviewed the Planet of the Apes movies and stuff like that, with the motion capture, the technology isn't quite there as far as like with the mouth moving, like that facial animation it looks a little cheesy at times, but for the most part it was pretty good. There's some cutscenes in this game where it legitimately looks like you're watching a movie. It's some really, really great graphics. As far as I'm concerned, there's really two game modes that I buy these games for, especially the historical Call of Duties, the campaign and Nazi Zombies. And obviously I just got done talking about the campaign, so I'll go ahead and move on to Nazi Zombies. I've only played a few matches on my own, but it's just as good as I remember. Kind of the fun, for me at least, of this game mode is kind of getting together with your buddies and just trying to find out like how far you can get. Because I mean, there's no end game to Nazi Zombies. It's just wave after wave and trying to get through and just seeing how far you can get. And like later in the games, I don't remember where they made the change, but I know the first couple of games, that's what it was. Like you just basically had this area, had this map, and you just try to get as far as you can. I think I want to say it was Black Ops. They started to kind of not necessarily make it a story, but kind of make it more where there was more objective. It was more objective driven game mode. And I didn't really like that as much, but I think with this iteration of Nazi Zombies, I think they did a pretty good job of kind of mixing the two. There's still a lot of just trying to get past all the waves, but then there's some objectives, but it's not really that important if you do them. So I think you can kind of play them either way you want to. And so I definitely appreciated that. And it's a lot easier to play on your own because I don't have a ton of friends that have this game. And so I've been playing most of the Nazi Zombies by myself. And before, in the earlier iterations of the Nazi Zombies, it was really hard to play it on your own because eventually you just got to a point where it was ridiculous. And I think that the way that they've kind of structured the maps, I think it makes it a little bit easier to play on your own. So I definitely appreciate that because I need to get more friends that have this game because I definitely want to play more Nazi Zombies with other people, but I think I'm definitely in the minority when I say that I don't really get these games for the multiplayer, but I know a majority of the people that do definitely play a ton of multiplayer. But I was surprised at how much I've gotten into that aspect of the game. I have played, I would say, maybe 10 to 15 team deathmatch matches, and I've really enjoyed it so far. I'm definitely much more of a fan of like the Halo, Destiny type of multiplayer, and I may have mentioned this before on the podcast, but I just feel like the skill of the player wins out more in those particular games because you have that armor, so camping isn't quite as effective as it is in Call of Duty, but I really enjoyed the multiplayer in this particular Call of Duty. I definitely won't put in the time that I would in like a Halo game to get really, really good at it and to prestige and get really, really good weapons. But I've surprisingly put a decent amount of time into it. I like that there's like this command center now. I don't know if that's something that they've had in past games. Like I said, I think the last time I played a Call of Duty game was Black Ops 2, and I don't remember them having it in that. And so I don't know if it's something that they took from Destiny, because I know that was kind of the first time I saw like a multiplayer hub that you could go to and like buy different weapons and stuff like that. And so I thought that was a kind of a cool addition to this game. But I'm really enjoying it, and even though it's not quite up there with Breath of the Wild, I definitely gave a run for its money.
Yeah, all I got out of that was that you don't have any friends. So,
which I mean, that kind of comes with the territory when you're a dickhead like I am.
No, man, you said a lot of words about Call of Duty, so sounds good, bro. I'm not gonna play it, but it's good that they're kind of bouncing back because they had some poor years over the last few. Since I mean, you put out a franchise every fall, you're going to have some bad games. So it's cool that they kind of bounce back with this one.
For sure. So what'd you read this week for comics?
I read Invincible Iron Man number 593. which is the first part of a new story arc called The Search for Tony Stark. So during Civil War II, apparently, because I never finished it, but in that, what's it called? Like the event comic that was, I guess, in the fall of last year, Tony Stark fell into a comatose state and no one could really determine what was wrong with him. So Dr. Doom took up the mantle of Iron Man, and I've talked about his comic a few times on this podcast. Infamous Iron Man is the storyline that has kind of focused on him. And then Riri Jones, or oh no, I might have messed up her name. Do you know, is it Riri Jones or Riri Williams? Might be Riri Williams. She's a new character. She made her own armor and she was embraced by Stark Enterprises and became the new Iron Man, but she goes by Iron Heart. So all through this, Tony Stark's body, like I said, has been in a pod at Stark Industries, and he's been basically comatose, not really a part of these comics, except for Riri's AI is like a version of Tony Stark that he had uploaded to a server before he died. So basically no Tony Stark, and this comic is kind of starting the story to rectify that. So with that being said, there's definitely a mystery theme, at least for me, on today's podcast, because this comic kind of kicks off a mystery arc where they're trying to solve the mystery as to what happens to his body. So in this first issue of Finding Tony Stark, his body goes missing, and everyone is trying to determine if it was stolen or if he basically recovered and left Stark Industries. Like I said, 1 minute he's in this pod, the next minute he's up and vanished. So a lot of supporting characters are present in this comic from both Infamous Iron Man and the Ironheart storyline that was going on with Riri. So that includes MJ Watson, which is cool to see. Friday, which of course is Tony's AI. Amanda, which is Tony Stark's biological mother, and Dr. Doom, of course, and then the Thing, which is cool to see because, again, we've mentioned it a few times on this podcast, the Fantastic Four have kind of been disbanded in comics right now. As far as the comic itself, it's really not bad. I've really liked Bendis's, Michael Bendis, that is, his run on the Iron Man character. He's been writing it for a few years now, and this was also co-written by him and a couple others. The end of the comic ends on a cliffhanger, and there's some weird visuals that bring up more questions and answers, and I talked about it last week, and we've talked about it a lot since you and I have talked about number ones quite often on the podcast recently, that, you know, the first issue of a storyline has to really grab you and suck you into the story. So I get why there's a cliffhanger, but it's a very weird cliffhanger that left me feeling a little uneasy. That being said, I think that I'll stick with this book. But I do want to take a moment to mention how fucking confusing the Marvel Legacy renumbering has been. And I don't know if you've noticed this as you've gone to the comic book shop, but after the Marvel Legacy one shot that we spoke about over the summer, I guess it was probably back in August or September, they renumbered some of their biggest comics, and Iron Man, Invincible Iron Man is one of those. So like I mentioned, it's Invincible Iron Man 593, which has made it very difficult for me to keep track of what I'm reading and where I'm at with what I'm reading. So it's funny. I read this story that even Marvel can't really figure out what the number should be with some of these comics, because they've advertised certain comics as at a certain number, and then they've gone back and retconned it because they forget about certain runs here or there. So at the end of the day, it's been really confusing for them and for us, and I don't get why they keep doing it, but hopefully it sticks for a while and we can kind of keep track of where we're at with certain things as opposed to needing to jump to different numbers twice a year.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that Marvel and DC both do that irritates me, but the numbering thing, just the OCD nerd in me is just like, what the hell are you guys doing? Like, if you guys can't keep track of it, how are we supposed to? It's super, super irritating.
Yeah, but mostly Marvel. Anyways.
Yeah, but mostly Marvel, of course.
Anyways, what'd you read?
So once I tell you this, it's going to be pretty obvious. But Boom Studios just started another Planet of the Apes crossover comic event called Kong on the Planet of the Apes. Of course, when I first heard about this book, it seems so obvious. So how have we not seen this crossover before? It just seems like the most obvious Planet of the Apes crossover you could possibly have. Of course, I've talked about this before. I love the Peter Jackson King Kong film. And of course, the Planet of the Apes franchise is one of my favorites. So I was super, super excited about this, especially because Boom Studios has done a really good job with these Planet of the Apes crossover events. So I was definitely really, really excited about it. That being said, when I first started reading it, I was a little bit disappointed because they've been doing a lot of these crossovers with the Apes franchise, and a few of them have started kind of where the first original film leaves off. For those that haven't seen the original film, what are you doing? Definitely watch it. Well, basically, spoiler alert, Taylor and Nova go off. They kind of ride off into the sunset. And then, of course, you have that classic scene with the Statue of Liberty. And basically, that's where a couple of these crossover events start. And that's where Kong on the Planet of the Apes starts. And so I was kind of a little disappointed that they went back to that well. But once I kind of got over that, I think that the way that they brought these two franchises together was really, really interesting and kind of obvious when I'm going to tell you. But basically, if you have the Statue of Liberty, that means that Ape City is essentially where New York City was. And of course, that's where King Kong was when he climbed the Empire State Building. So they actually find Kong buried, dead, because he fell off the Empire State Building, and he's kind of buried deep underground. And then when they find him, they decide to go and explore Skull Island. So I think that's really cool. And one of the things that I love about the Apes franchise and science fiction in general is that they use these really cool concepts to kind of use it as a tool for social satire. And of course you have King Kong, which that movie is about racism and greed and pride. And then of course you have the Planet of the Apes movies. So that's my favorite type of science fiction. And I think that they do some similar stuff that they touch on in the King Kong franchise in this book. And so I definitely appreciate that. And so I was really, at first I was hesitant because of, like I said, they kind of went to that well with the original Planet of the Apes film. But once I kind of got over that, I was really impressed with where this comic crossover event is going.
Yeah. It's cool for fans like you that they keep this franchise alive with comic books and they do these awesome crossovers, but not something I'm going to pick up. But yeah, I'm happy for you, man.
Well, that's a shocker. I assumed that you were going to pick this up.
No, but it's cool that they're keeping one of your favorite franchises alive through this medium. So that's good.
For sure. So what's nerd news this week?
All right. So a few stories this week. In my previous part of the comic segment, I talked about, it's Michael Bendis, right? I'm not messing up his first name, am I?
I think it's Michael. I'm not sure. Like when you said it, it didn't sound right, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't sound right when I say it. And that shows what kind of integrity I have for this podcast when I don't even write down his first name. But basically, he has been a huge writer for Marvel over the last few years. He's he's created a few characters for him, and he's kind of been a staple.
It's Brian Michael Bendis.
Okay,
so you were close.
Kind of right. I don't know if he goes by Michael or if I'm just making that up. But either way, he is hopping over to DC to write for them. So to me, this wasn't really a big news story. I mean, I think writers kind of shift gears all the time and hop between the two comic book publishers and, do things that they write for characters they can't obviously write for whenever they're tied to one publisher. But this became like this huge story. And I don't know that it needed to be. But either way, I wanted to bring it up because, like I said, it got a lot of traction in the news.
I don't know. It just seemed really weird. I think about it exactly like you just said. This wasn't that shocking of news for me because they move and the writers are interchangeable as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they're definitely there's some really talented guys, but they move companies different all the time. So that wasn't a huge deal. I think the big thing And why this was such a big story is because he is a big name within the comic book community. Also, he does a lot of big books for Marvel. So it was kind of like DC stealing the big Marvel guy. And so I think that was why it was such a big deal. But honestly, and I said this on Facebook and Twitter, I always kind of thought that he was a little overrated to begin with. He has some talent, obviously, but I was never that huge of a fan of his. I mean, he basically wrote, with, among others, Civil War II, which I hated. So, I mean, I've always kind of thought of him as a bit of overrated anyways.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree. Obviously, I didn't like Civil War II enough to finish it. I enjoyed his run on Iron Man quite a bit. But at the end of the day, like, I think that it's good for the industry, for artists and writers to kind of flip-flop periodically, just because each publisher has such rich characters. And if you have stories you want to tell about those characters, you should, be willing to do that and jump and sign new contracts and tell new stories and keep your art fresh. So I'm all for it.
For sure.
Cool. So let's see. Next week, Justice League comes out. So obviously there's been a lot of press with the actors promoting the movie, and one point of conversation has been around the potential Flashpoint movie that was announced, and Ezra Miller has been asked about it in some interviews, and he was asked if he would be for Jeffrey Dean Morgan potentially playing Batman in the Flashpoint movie. If you're unfamiliar with the Flashpoint storyline from the comics, Flash goes back in time and kind of screws some stuff up, and whenever the timeline kind of course corrects, Thomas Wayne has become Batman, and Bruce Wayne was the person that was killed in Crime Alley, and Martha Wayne has become the Joker. So this is a pretty famous storyline. In addition to Ezra basically saying in interviews that he would love for Jeffrey Dean Morgan to play Thomas Wayne as Batman, Jeffrey Dean Morgan himself was asked in a recent interview, since he's been promoting The Walking Dead, and he kind of played coy about it, but basically gave away that that's what would happen. If you're confused as to why Jeffrey Dean Morgan would be playing Batman in this movie, it's because he played Thomas Wayne in the flashbacks in Batman versus Superman. So it sounds like that's probably the route they'll go, which I'm fine with. I think Jeffrey Dean Morgan is a pretty great actor. He kind of chews the scenery a bit as Negan, but he's done some great work. And I think that he'd be a really good grizzled Thomas Wayne as the Batman character in Flashpoint. Personally, I'm a huge fan of Flashpoint. I think that that's an awesome storyline within comic books. And then it gives Flash an opportunity to kind of shine a little bit as well. So I'm all for it. I was curious what you think.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in it. It'd be one of the few times I think accidentally DC got something right, that they just so happened to cast a really good actor as this kind of a bit part in this movie, and it just so happens that they decide later that they're going to do this other storyline that involves this other character, and they already have this really awesome actor to play it. So I think they accidentally did something right. But yeah, I think he's really good. I don't think that he's that bad as Negan. I actually think he's pretty good. It's just that I just don't like that show. He's the best part of that last season.
Oh, for sure. He is. Yeah.
I just can't stand that show. I actually forgot that it had just started recently. I mean, it's been on for like a good month now, but I was just like, as soon as I saw that it was premiering, whenever it was a while back, I was just like, got relieved that I didn't have to watch it. Like, I was like, oh, I'm so glad that I'm done with that bullshit.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of how I felt as well. Like, every year whenever that movie or that show comes back on the air, Facebook lights up with people excited for it. And again, I'm happy for those people that still love that show. But for me, it was like, oh yeah, that thing. At least I don't have to commit to that. So I'm pretty happy that we both called off watching this show and reviewing that show on the podcast, because
we're still going to review it.
No, we're not. We made a pact last year after it was basically a chore. So I'm glad that that's not even on my radar. So
for sure.
Cool. Let's see. Disney wants to buy 21st Century Fox or 20th Century Fox. So that's the thing. I don't know that it will ever happen, but it was in the news, so I got to report it.
Yeah, so I think I already heard something that already fell through, and it seemed like a long shot to begin with. I mean, it was kind of a cool idea. It seems like it would be more likely that they would do a Sony Marvel type of deal before that they would just go ahead and sell it outright. But it sounded like, at least the stuff that I read, it was just because Fox kind of wanted to go more towards TV and kind of sell off some of their movie stuff so they didn't have to concentrate so much on it. And, I mean, that makes sense, but, I mean, you own the X-Men, you own a lot of these big franchises. It seems like you would at least keep it going just for that.
Yeah, for me, it's like, you know, I'm the biggest Disney fan in the world. Like, I love Disney, I love Marvel, I love Star Wars, and I love that they're all under the same banner. So it'd be cool to get the X-Men and the Fantastic Four back under that banner, but at a certain point, I don't want Disney to own everything. I don't want them
For sure.
Yeah, so at a certain point, like, I think that competition is healthy. So, you know, they can't just buy up everything. They can't just have a monopoly on the movie industry. So, for me, I'm happy that it fell through, but I did see a report yesterday, I think, that it's not necessarily dead. So I will keep my finger on that pulse. So we'll see.
All right, cool.
All right, last story. Rian Johnson is going to do a trilogy of Star Wars movies, I guess, after episode 9 wraps up. So, obviously, no word on what those stories will be, if it will be a continuation of the Skywalker story, or if it will be something brand new, or what the time period is, anything like that. We don't know, but he is going to develop 3 movies set in the Star Wars universe that will be, I guess, canon to the episodes 1 through 9 that we're going to get.
I had read somewhere that it was going to be something brand new, like he was bringing new characters into the universe.
Yeah,
did I read that wrong?
I didn't read that, but I'm curious. Do they title it Episode 10, 11, 12, or are these just 3 standalone Star Wars stories movies? And that's what I think the question is.
I think at a certain point you kind of have to end the Skywalker saga, and I would assume that episode 9 or 10 is going to do that. So at a certain point, I think you just kind of continue on. I mean, it still obviously happens in the same universe. It's kind of continuation, not necessarily a continuation, but it's still... I don't want to see like, oh, well, this happened in between episode 4 and 5 of the Skywalker saga. I want it just to continue on, but just with different characters.
Yeah, that's where my head's at. Like, maybe you are able to carry over some of the characters like Rey or Poe or Kylo or whoever makes it out of this trilogy alive. But I understand that you can't always, you know, go back to Vader or go back to Luke. Obviously, Han and Leia are going to be out of the picture. So Disney, of course, wants to keep making these Star Wars movies forever. And you can't tell, like you said, a million stories that take place between the episodes. So you have to come up with original content at some point. So hopefully this is a good sign, if anything, about The Last Jedi, because they're trusting him with quite a bit here.
Yeah, for sure. I'm pretty excited about it. I mean, obviously, I'm excited about The Last Jedi, and I'm excited about the idea of him doing, because I think he's a talented filmmaker, of doing more Star Wars movies. He obviously enjoyed making The Last Jedi enough to kind of agree to do 3 more movies. And Disney, like you said, obviously feels good enough about The Last Jedi to allow him to do so. So I'm definitely really excited about what he's going to bring to the universe.
Cool, man. Maybe we'll get a trilogy of Porg movies.
I don't know about all that. I'm not quite pissed off about it, but I'm already done with them.
Yeah, I'm indifferent. Like, I'm the guy though that really didn't care about the Ewoks either. Like, Return of the Jedi is still my favorite Star Wars movie, so the Ewoks don't bother me that bad. So I hope the Porgs don't either. For
sure. So this was your last nerd news story.
Maybe, I don't know. You're fucking rushing me, bro?
No, you literally said that before you mentioned this.
Yeah,
so
but
you're rushing you.
No, but what if like something popped up right on my screen that was like breaking news? Like Disney bought...
Was there?
Nope, there wasn't. You can go.
So there was no reason to interrupt me. So...
It's a podcast. We talk back and forth, goddammit.
Okay. Are you done? You done now?
I don't know.
Can I do my thing?
Last week's episode was called "Stop Saying Dumb Things." As soon as you stop saying dumb things, we can be done.
Then it would just be the Tyler that you're looking for.
Jesus Christ, man! You talked about Call of Duty for like 10 minutes.
I'm saying if I stopped saying dumb things, I wouldn't talk. I was trying to call myself dumb in a weird way.
Oh, gotcha.
But you ruined the joke. Anyways,
maybe the joke was bad because you're dumb.
Okay, yeah, I'm done. Anyways, so Tyler doesn't tell me for the most part, doesn't tell me what the nerd news is going to be. So I'm just curious, is there a reason why you didn't bring up all of the stuff that's going on in Hollywood right now? Or are we just going to stay away from that? Because I'd prefer if we just stayed away from it. Yeah. But
that's why I didn't bring it up. It's like nerd news for me is just a way for us to talk about movies or TV shows or video games that are coming up. And potentially sometimes we have to talk about somebody who passed away that had a big impact on us. But for the most part, like we try to keep this podcast pretty happy and pretty funny, so I didn't feel the need to bring it up. But obviously a lot of people are getting called out right now. A lot of people that Pat and I used to like their stuff, so I don't know, I just wanted to stay away from it. If you want to talk about any of it, I'm more than happy to.
No, I completely agree. I just thought that we should mention it at least once, that we're not completely ignoring it. We know that it's happening and it sucks, but like, I completely agree with you. We're just trying to keep it loose. I mean, shitty things happen all the time. The world sucks. So we understand that you guys are listening for fun and for entertainment. So if we talked about every shitty thing that happened, then this podcast would just be a bummer. So I completely agree with you. I was just curious, and I thought we should at least acknowledge it once.
And that's a good call, because maybe not talking about it makes it sound like we endorse it, because we've talked about some of these people before in good light. So I appreciate that you brought it up, and obviously, Pat and I don't condone anything that's going on, and we'll leave it at that.
For sure. All right, so on to the main topic. Tyler teased this a little bit, but we're going to be reviewing another movie. We're going to be reviewing Murder on the Orient Express, which was directed by Kenneth Branagh. Is it Branagh or Brenna?
How do you pronounce it?
Branagh? Okay, that's what I'm going to go with. Who also happens to star in the film. It's based on an Agatha Christie novel, which tells the story of 13 stranded train passengers who happen upon a dead body that's deemed a murder by the detective on board. That detective, played by Branagh, must solve the case before anyone else gets hurt. Honestly, for our audience, I'm going to be 100% honest. I had no desire to see this. I actually thought it looked kind of silly when I saw the million trailers for this before every movie I saw for the last 2 months. They really pimped the shit out of this movie. I never read the book or saw the original film, but for some strange reason, my wife really wanted to see it, and she goes with me to see a lot of shit that she doesn't want to see, so I figured I would play the good husband and go see this with her. And as it turns out, there wasn't a whole lot going on this week as far as other movies or TV that we could review on this podcast, so we decided, since we were both kind of going to see it anyways, we would review it. So I had almost no expectations going into this film, which usually plays in a film's favor, because we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast before, but when we have high expectations, sometimes it's disappointing when a film doesn't at least meet it. So when you have low or no expectation for something, it usually doesn't take much for us to feel entertained in this movie. And of course, we'll get into whether or not we enjoyed the film, which, Tyler kind of already spoiled how he felt about it. But I will definitely try to save that for the review. But how'd you feel about going into this movie?
So going into it, I honestly was a little excited. I've never seen the original Murder on the Orient Express, and I thought that it was a pretty cool ensemble cast. So I thought that, hopefully something cool would come out of it, and I was really intrigued by the mystery involved. I did kind of spoil it at the beginning there, that I didn't necessarily get what I wanted, but, going into it, I did have expectations, whereas opposed to you didn't think much of it going in.
All right, so as we do with every review that we do, We kind of start off as just a kind of a general overview of how we felt about the movie. We call it broad strokes. How'd you feel about the Orient Express?
So I'm still trying to put my nose on what it was about this movie that made me feel this way. But overall, I thought it was really, really strange. It didn't really feel like a mystery movie to me. It felt more like a chore. It was definitely a chore to watch. So I've said this about some of the recent films we've reviewed in the last few months, but the one thing I kept thinking to myself as I watched this film was, why should I care? Why should I care who did it? Why should I care about the mystery involved and the inspection that's going on in this film? It didn't make me care about the characters. When I got out of the movie, I told my wife that I had the perfect line for reviewing this film, which was that this is the definition of self-indulgence done so by Kenneth Branagh. But then she let me know that most reviews that she read said the same thing, so I felt deflated a bit and that I wasn't as original as I thought I was. But I mean, I think that hits the nail on the head. Like, he directed this movie, he starred in this movie, and it was basically just a platform for him to be wacky with a French accent and a crazy mustache and solve a murder that I ended up not caring about. So I was definitely not a fan of this film.
Yeah, we're going to be pretty similar as we normally are with this film. We've kind of talked a little bit about this before, this idea that Hollywood tends to learn the wrong lesson when movies do well or don't do well. I don't think that this movie is going to necessarily flop, but I don't think that it's going to make the money that the studio wants it to make. I mean, there was a decent amount of people in my Thursday night early screening, so I doubt it's going to completely flop, but because it is a franchise, I guess. I mean, it's based on this book and it's based on this classic film, so I'm assuming that they want this movie to do well. So I'm sure when it doesn't make the money that they expect it to, they're going to make some silly excuse. We're going to see the news story about them pointing the finger at this or that, why it didn't make the money they thought it was going to make. But in reality, I think it was because certain films just shouldn't be remade. We learned that lesson last year with Rocky Horror. Now, granted, that was a made-for-TV movie, but you just can never recapture the magic of some of these classic films. And like I said, I've never seen the original. I've not read the book, but it's talked about in such high regard. I'm assuming that there was magic there, at least in the original. And I'm sure that there's a lot of modern mystery films that have been inspired by this story. So we have seen this type of movie so many times before that I'm sure it was groundbreaking when it came out decades ago, but because we've seen this movie and this story so many times, nothing about this was ever going to surprise us. Like, nothing about this story, I really didn't care. I kind of knew what was going to happen because, like I said, so many movies had probably been inspired by this that we kind of knew the story before we even kind of started watching it. So nothing was ever going to surprise us. Nothing really caught my attention with this movie. I will say that I'm trying to do my best not go all negative all the time with some of these reviews. So I will say that I did really love the environment. I thought the set designs were really cool. The costumes were really great. It kind of felt like a Wes Anderson film as far as that was concerned. Unfortunately, it just didn't have the witty dialogue and the character development that you would expect from a Wes Anderson film. But I did really enjoy the set designs and kind of the environment of the film. Unfortunately, the writing and the characters kind of let me down.
Yeah, 100%, man.
All right, so let's move right on to the story. How'd you feel about this film as far as the story is concerned?
So, for an ensemble cast that I was excited about, I went into it expecting a lot of great things and expecting this great cast of actors and characters to sell me on this murder. It did a really poor job of making me care about not only the characters, but about the whole situation that this film entails. So I'll use Daisy Ridley as an example. I think that she's amazing, and I was excited to see her in something other than Star Wars. I kind of figured that it would be impossible for me not to fall in love with her character in this movie and her performance in this movie. Yet the story does nothing to make me care about what happens to her or what happens to her character or anything going on around her. So that's just an example of many of the people in this movie that I generally like. So at the core of it, I say that the storytelling is bland and lacks depth. A mystery film only works if you care about the mystery that's being solved, and nothing presented to me during this story made me care. The film shifted tones a lot during the movie in ways that didn't make sense. And when you go back and you watch it, like the first act is a completely different movie than the second and the third act. There's no consistency, and that makes it seem really muddled. With all of that being said, I don't think that this was a poorly made movie. I mean, I could definitely tell that there was passion in making this movie, especially for Kenneth Branagh, but I just think that it misses the mark on a lot of levels, and it comes back to a pretty muddled story that I was never really bought into.
Yeah, and that kind of goes along with what I was saying earlier. And my big thing with the story is it never captured my attention at all. It was super, super dull pretty much the entire time. And they definitely tried, I think, at times to capture your attention. Branagh is obviously an experienced filmmaker, so he knows what he needs to do to capture people's attention. I think especially that first scene in the movie tried to do that. Like, I think he knew that the next 20, 30 minutes was going to be really exposition heavy. So he thought he needed something at the beginning to kind of capture our attention. So that first scene kind of, I think, served, or at least tried to serve, two different purposes. It introduced you to his character and kind of his skill as a detective, because that plays a huge part in the rest of the film. But also, it was supposed to be a fun scene that kind of would hook us at the very beginning, because the next 20, 30 minutes was going to be kind of slow and kind of a slow burn. So he needed something at the very beginning to kind of catch us and hook us, to kind of provide us that entertainment for the next 20, 30 minutes that were going to be a little dull. Unfortunately, kind of going along with what you said, which I thought was a really good point, was when you get done with the end of the movie, that first scene, not only did it not capture my attention, but it just didn't feel right within the rest of the film. It just felt completely different tone than the rest of the film. So I thought it was definitely a misfire there. Really, honestly, this is based on a book, like I said, so it's not necessarily the film's problem entirely, but we've talked about this before. I think that Hollywood definitely has a small world problem. And I say that because, and it's really apparent in this movie, because all these people, all these characters just happen to be on the same train. And it happens to also include the greatest detective in the world, who the only person that could ever solve this crime happens to be also on this train with these people. And maybe that was forgivable 30, 40 years ago when this book was first released and this movie was originally premiered. But it's really hard to forgive in 2017. Like, I mean, I rolled my eyes a lot at that premise. And so that should have changed in this remake, and it unfortunately didn't change. And there's just too much going on in this movie. As far as the characters are concerned, there's too many characters in this movie. This movie needed to be 3 hours long to fit all these characters. There was literally more than one moment in this film that I had forgotten that character even existed. There was two particular characters that I honestly didn't even know were in the movie until about an hour and a half into the movie. It was ridiculous. Like, this movie legitimately needed to be 3 hours long. We talk a lot about character development and how important it is in these stories. And this movie just had way too many characters to really give them good enough character development. So when you got to the big reveal towards the end, it just was completely underwhelming, because I didn't really care about these characters at all. And the whodunit aspect that you brought up was pretty obvious from pretty much the second person he interviewed after the murder. If you've seen any movie, any crime mystery movie, you should have been able to kind of piece it together. I mean, my wife is not a huge fan of this genre, and even she thought it was pretty obvious who it was or who committed the murder. And I'm not saying that she's not smart or anything like that. She's actually, I think she watches these movies the way you should watch them. I watch it and try to figure out who did it the entire time. She just kind of watches it and enjoys the ride as it going on. But even her, she was just like, after we got out of there, she was like, yeah, it was super obvious who it was. So I don't know. Like, the character development wasn't good, so the big reveal was underwhelming, but it was also underwhelming because it was pretty obvious. Also, yes, I get that he's a good detective, but he made some pretty big leaps. There's no way that he could have figured out some of the stuff that he figured out. Like, I don't care how good you are. There's just no way. So, yeah, the big reveal at the end was really, really underwhelming because of the bad character development, the bad plot holes, and just the fact that it was super, super obvious.
No, man, I 100% agree.
All right, so moving on to performances, how'd you feel everybody did in this movie?
I thought, for the most part, that, you have a huge cast, so, the majority of the cast, the performances were serviceable. And you kind of mentioned it in your broad strokes, I feel like we come across as really negative in our reviews on this podcast, and I hate to just point out the performances I didn't like, but no performances in this movie really were extraordinary. So I will say that Michelle Pfeiffer was pretty bad. Kenneth Branagh chewed the scenery to no end, and I think that he was a bit over the top as the detective. I don't know where Johnny Depp was wanting to go for his small role, like what he was thinking, but he definitely came across as though he didn't care, even though he's only in the movie for a couple scenes. It was a pretty big leap for him because usually it's the exact opposite and he's over the top, but he did absolutely nothing in this movie except for, it seemed like, read from a cue card. So overall, like, nobody blew me away, but those are the three performances I was actually, like, pretty disappointed by.
And I completely agree with all three of the things that you mentioned. I will say that there's a lot of great performers in this cast, but they weren't really given much to work with. So, I mean, you can't really blame them too much for it. I will say that most of acting is about making choices, and Branagh made two really weird stylistic choices that were super distracting. You already kind of mentioned the accent a little bit previous in the review, and I don't know if the accent was good or not, but it was super, super thick, and he really laid it on quite thick, and it was super distracting. And then, of course, the mustache was really dumb looking, and it was super distracting. And so I don't know if that's a thing from the book, like I said, or the original movie, or he was just kind of having a callback to that. But it was really distracting. It took me out of the movie a lot, really, really frequently. So, yeah, I have to say that. I mean, that's a big part of your performance, is making those choices, and I don't think he did a very good choice. Johnny Depp was Johnny Depp in this movie. He didn't do anything. He was just being Johnny Depp, it's really weird. Like you said, he just didn't seem like he was all that interested in it. And then I would say somebody that you didn't bring up that I was actually surprised that I liked in this movie was Josh Gad. He didn't really do a ton in it, but he's not really known for his dramatic roles. And I thought that he did a really good job with the few scenes that he was asked to do. This is not really, the next thing that I'm going to talk about is not really performance related. I just thought that Daisy Ridley was miscast in this movie because she's in no way old enough to be the character that they say that she is in this movie. Yeah. Because basically she said that she was this, they call her a governess, but it's just basically a tutor, a school teacher to this other person, which look like she might actually be older than Daisy Ridley's character in this movie. So I didn't understand how that worked. So not necessarily performance related. I just thought that she was miscast in this movie. And Michelle Pfeiffer was super, super over the top. Just laid it on super, super thick. It kind of worked for most of this film because you find out later that that's kind of plays into the character that she's playing. But when it comes to the big reveal, she's still super, super over the top. So it doesn't really work at that moment and just kind of takes you out of the movie. So for the most part, other than Josh Gad, who wasn't really in this movie, most of the performances weren't necessarily bad, but they were just a little over the top for my taste.
Yeah, man, I definitely agree.
So I'm kind of in a weird position with this film because normally we have another segment. Like if we're talking about a horror movie, we talk about kind of if it really was effective horror, if it scared us and what scenes scared us. And when we talk about TV, we obviously do notable episodes. And when we're talking about an action movie, we talk about action scenes and how effective those were. But there was really not a whole lot going on in this movie. There was almost no action. There was really no horror at all. So I think we're pretty much done unless there was something else you wanted to bring up.
No, I kind of figured that we would talk maybe about the mystery. But
okay.
But any category that you put here was going to be bad. For me, there was nothing good about this film except for a scene here or there. So, if we want to talk about the mystery, that's fine. It was bad. That's what I have to say about it.
Yeah, so I kind of thought about that, but then I was going to touch on it in the story that it was pretty obvious who it was. So there wasn't a whole lot of mystery, at least as far as my wife and I were concerned, because we both thought it was pretty obvious who it was pretty early in the mystery.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So overall, not a very well executed film. For
sure. So star rating?
I was going to give it a 2.5, but I can't see myself ever watching this again. And for that, even if it was on TV, I would change the channel. So for that, I think I'm going to give it a 2.
I feel pretty similar to that, but I think that there was enough as far as the set design and that kind of stuff. It wasn't poorly put together. And for me, a 2 says, okay, yeah, the acting was bad, the writing was bad, the movie was just poorly put together. So I kind of give it a 2.5 just for the fact that it's a well put together movie.
Okay, cool.
But I'm definitely not recommending it, hence the 2.5 and not the 3. All right, so as we end every episode, we're going to end it with a nerd favorite. I talked, as Tyler brought up, for 10 minutes about Call of Duty, so it's getting towards the end of the year, so I figured that it would be a good time to kind of talk about what our favorite game of the year for 2017 is. I have played probably the most I've gamed in a really long time this year. It's been a really, really good year for me, mostly because of course, I've really started to take the YouTube channel a lot more seriously this year than I have in past. So I definitely have gamed a lot, and it's been a really, really good year, not just for me personally, but just for the gaming industry as a whole. Like I said at the beginning with what I'm into, Call of Duty definitely gave Breath of the Wild a run for its money, but ultimately, if I had to make a choice, which I'm going to because that's my nerd favorite, but I'm going to go with Breath of the Wild because I am such a fan of the franchise, and the open world aspect is just so amazing. It's so cool to be not Zelda, but Link in the Zelda universe and be able to kind of just do whatever you want. There's so much in this video game that you can do. I mean, you could basically just go hours and hours and never touch the story. And it's just such a great game. The environment is really beautiful, and the storytelling is fantastic. But there's been a lot of other great games. You have Resident Evil 7, Madden 17, Madden 18, Madden 17 was a good game too, but Injustice 2, Little Nightmares, Cuphead, Call of Duty. I haven't even played the new NBA game or Mario Odyssey yet. I've heard some really cool things about the new Wolfenstein, and I haven't even gotten around to Destiny 2 yet, so it's been a really, really great year for gaming.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it's been a great year for gaming because my personal life has basically gotten in the way of me gaming for the last half year. So I don't know that my Xbox has been hooked up since, like, for an extended period of time since probably June. So this was a pretty hard question for me, and I have a pretty lame answer. With that being said, like, obviously I'm getting settled now in my new home, and I hope to game quite a bit over the next month and a half. But if you were to ask me right now, there's probably only 2 or 3 games I can choose from. And I would say that my favorite of those 2 or 3 games would probably be the Batman Telltale series that came out earlier this year and that is currently in its 2nd season. Obviously, those games aren't really that involved. It's more of a choose your own adventure type situation, but I think that they're telling a really cool story in that game right now. And of course, with us being huge Batman fans, that's pretty big for me to see something new and original with that character. So it's something that I've really enjoyed. That being said, like, obviously, I hope that I play a lot more in the next month and a half so that that's not my game of the year because I just didn't play anything. So a lot of cool things are coming out. A lot of cool things have come out. So I look forward to gaming a lot more going forward.
Yeah, for sure. It seemed like for the most part, especially since we started this podcast, you are the bigger gamer of the two of us. Like, I went through a phase where it was just basically Halo and Madden were all I played. And then just recently, like I said, kind of mostly due to starting really taking the YouTube channel seriously, I've kind of expanded my horizons again. Because growing up, I was a huge gamer, especially in high school, and college a lot as well. But once I kind of got my big boy job, it kind of fell to the wayside, and it was really just Halo and Madden. So it's kind of a shame that just because of your personal life, you haven't been able to game as much as I know you want to.
Yeah, but, you know, that journey is nearing its end. I have a new house and I'm going to get a new TV and all sorts of cool stuff. So I look forward to hitting the pavement again here soon.
For sure. All right. So that's the end of episode 164 of the Nerd You're Looking For podcast. Of course, we'd appreciate if you subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, any podcatcher you use. We're on it. Definitely review us. That helps us out a lot. It kind of separates us from all the other nerd culture podcasts out there. Of course, you can check out our website, thenerdspodcast.com. Comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Nerd You're Looking For. Check out our Twitch channel, which I'm assuming once Tyler gets his Xbox set up, he's going to be doing his weekly stream on Monday. Again, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. They're both at The Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Google+. Apparently, I can't talk. Email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. And, of course, vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt.
we are The Nerds You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
Later, guys.